Life. A constant ebb and flow of good and bad experiences. We spend hours scrolling, watching perfect highlight reels of people's lives. I've been a storyteller for 9 years. I have yet to meet a person who hasn't had a dark shadow cast over their soul from staring death or trauma in the face, myself included. In sharing my experiences, I've gained tools for days when those shadows get a little too dark. I'm Paulina Bucka, and this is not your typical mental health podcast. We all have a story. It's time to start using yours for your revival. In the last several months, I have spent a lot of time in prayer and meditation, trying to make sense and find a path for this new chapter of my life. I didn't realize how much of my time had been spent in survival mode instead of actually living. When I was fired back in January, I started saying yes to all the things I would normally say no to. Things completely out of my comfort zone.
This is who I want to be 2 years from now, is I want to be Cathey.
That is how I met Cathey. At a Galentine's event with successful entrepreneurs, female business owners, all making 6 to 7 to 8 figures a year. And here I was, a recently let go journalist with $20 to her name, trying to make it. In news, we fake it till we make it, and I've lived by that motto for decades, until that no longer served my bigger picture.
A lot of your struggle and a lot of your journey has to do with overcoming and meeting milestones. And then when you get to those milestones, what do you do with those milestones and how do you move them forward?
Cathey connected me with other entrepreneurs, business owners, and gave me encouragement and wise words as I navigated those first initial weeks. She didn't know it, but she helped me set a foundation for where I am now, a business owner myself. She speaks from experience and is brilliant in her field. Please help me welcome Cathey Kuo, the premier Las Vegas real estate broker.
My name's Cathey Kuo. I am currently an entrepreneur, commercial real estate broker, and investor. I've built a 7-figure revenue business. I've built an 8-figure real estate portfolio, and I've built multiple 6-figure businesses as well along the journey. I'm the child of first-generation immigrants. So I was born in the U.S., but my parents immigrated here from Taiwan. So they are fresh off the boat, basically. We built the family business together since I was 12 years old, actually. So people are like, did you start in real estate when you were 12? I was like, actually, yes, I actually did. Because as a child of immigrants, it's not a choice to have a summer job or after school job. It's not like, hey, do you want to work at the ice cream store? It's like, you live in this house, you live under this roof, you have to help out. And that's just how immigrant households are. If you're part of one, you probably know the journey and can relate. And so it's very different than I think people who are like second, third, or fourth generation in America. It is such a privilege and a blessing to live and grow up in this country. And so I'm very grateful for that. That's kind of like the Spark Notes version of it, I guess.
That SparkNotes version is really why we connected, because so much of your story sounded like my story. Mine is the 7 figures, okay? That's where I'm aspiring to get to, find my purpose and drive there. However, a lot of your story in terms of immigration and being a child of immigrants, my kids will be first generation immigrants. So I'm from Poland originally, and I grew up in Brooklyn. So I know that struggle, and I know what it's like to have to give up your Saturdays and your Sundays, or give up those extra time that you have to help your family. And many times, I'm sure as it was for you, you are the first person in your family reaching those milestones and those accolades. And you're teaching your family how to do it, and you're teaching yourself how to do it. Talk to me about kind of what that journey was like for you.
So I'm very fortunate in that, like, my mother is like, we had a pretty tumultuous relationship growing up, just like many mother-daughter relationships are, but she is just such an inspiration and role model to me. So our family portfolio really she led the charge on that. But I was like her right hand and her supporter on that journey. And so on the investing side, I was, after school, she'd take us around and we'd go look at different properties and we'd talk through what's good about this property, what's bad, why would we buy it, why would we not buy it. I would help put together like the Excel files, running the numbers for her. It was old school back then. We had Excel, but we didn't have a lot of like the software, I would say, to automate it. So it was manual, and sometimes she'd use her old school like calculator where you print the little receipts and calculate those numbers. So I was looking at like income and expense reports with her very early on. But the thing is, what a lot of people don't realize about real estate investing is, especially in certain cities like New York where we started, you can be asset rich and cash flow poor. What that means is you could have 7 figures in assets and you could be cash flow negative. And people are like, how? Because your expenses can exceed your income a lot of the times, especially in New York where the taxes are so high and people don't realize that. And so you're lucky if you break even. And so a lot of times you only make money when you sell and you realize the appreciation, or when you do a cash out refi and you're able to pull some equity out of it. But even that's not really making money. You're still getting a loan and having to pay interest on it. And in New York in particular, there's something actually called a mortgage interest tax, essentially. Like they tax you actually on that amount you pull out. Whereas in Vegas, they don't do that. So it depends on the regulations. And so that's why separate from the family business is how I had built my businesses. Because while we built a great portfolio together, I knew that cash flow was a struggle and I needed to build businesses where I would have the cash flow to support building the wealth and building the assets. And so my focus when I built my businesses was, okay, how can I build businesses where, number one, I think I've told you this before, but when you go into business to solve problems, you make money. And when you go into business to make money, you get problems, right? And so what problem could I solve was number one. But number two was also like, okay, what business can I solve a problem, but also can I cash flow? And not just because I already have this other one where it's like great at building wealth long term and great at like the assets, but not necessarily great when it comes to cash flow all the time.
Let's dive into that a little bit further, Cathey, because I love what you said. And that was one of the mindsets that I am recently adapting. It's if you have a product for someone, you're always going to have flow. If you are going into business to make money, you're always going to have problems. And that's something that you taught me. The more I listened to your story, the more I understood what that meant for you. And we just did a weekend of conscious coupling. I can't say that. I don't know why. Conscious coupling. And you talked about your journey once again about how finding a purpose behind what you're doing is really going to drive you into that next mountain, if you say, or so, into your next level and into your business and into your life. So talk to me about what that means for you.
You know, it's human nature and human behavior. Honestly, I'm a big Tony Robbins fan, as many people know. And he talks about this. Like, we will always do more for others than we will ever do for ourselves. Like a mother's love, you know, a child, like, or our love towards our mothers and vice versa, right? That kind of thing. Or towards your family. Most of the time, you'll sacrifice more and do more for others than you will for yourself. And so typically the people who are the most successful from what I've seen, it's because they have a purpose beyond themselves. And so I'm part of entrepreneurs organization I've mentioned. It's a organization of 7, 8, and 9-figure entrepreneurs. You have to income qualify to join. It's a global organization, so it's like legitimate. Like they ask for tax returns. They really check you out and make sure you're you're what you say you are. And so part of this organization, I've been a member for 2 years. What I learned and meeting all of these amazing entrepreneurs, I'm usually like the baby in the room, right? Most people are 5, 10, 15 years ahead of me. And what I've learned is that most people have a story of like some sort of trauma or breakdown that fueled their success. And so for me, my first thing was I was 15 years old when I found out that my dad cheated on my mom. And so at that point, I realized I never want to be in a position where I have to rely on a man for financial security and financial stability. I don't want my mom to stay in this marriage where she's unhappy because of her children and because she thinks she needs to for financial security. And so from 15 years old, I was just like, all right, I'm determined to help my mother get out of this situation. Number one, first and foremost. And then number two, to make sure I'm never in that position. And so I just powered through from the time I was 15. And it's like that push and that purpose kept me going no matter what, like never gave up. It wasn't a matter of if I can succeed. It's like how. All right. It's always like, and it's something I always say often, it's a Tony Robbins saying, but it's never a lack of resources. It's always a lack of resourcefulness. And so if you want to be successful, you understand that like there are always resources. The world is so abundant. There's a who, not how problem. You can figure it out if you want to. Most people make excuses as opposed to focusing on the solutions. And so that's really step one of the purpose. And then I told you a little bit about my second purpose. So I achieved that goal by the time I was 33, which was 2 years ago. And then it's interesting because during that time, it's like I met a good friend of mine who's also ultra successful, more so than me. She started her business a number of years before I did. And I was like, I don't know. I just feel like what I'm doing is not enough anymore, is what I told her. And I was like, I just feel like I'm not fulfilled. Like, I should be so happy. I've achieved all these milestones and goals. And she's like, it's a good thing. And I was like, how is this a good thing? Like, I feel depressed and I've always been a happy, joyful, optimistic person. And she's like, I know. And she's like, but just trust me. And she's like, read this book. The book is called The Second Mountain. And in reading that book, what I realized is like, I'm not alone on this journey. Like, it's like the oneness of humanity is what I think I recognize. And that we as humans go through similar experiences in different ways, regardless of our industry or our path. And what I realized is that many of us on this journey, when we achieve that financial success, that personal goal, which is what is the first mountain essentially, financial security, financial stability, personal goals, you go into this valley of despair and depression. Jim Carrey talks about this as well in one of his famous speeches, the actor Jim Carrey, and he says, you know, I wish everyone gets everything they have wished for to see that that's not it. Basically, is the gist of it. I don't think I'm quoting him correctly, but it's pretty famous. And what I realized through that is that my second mountain, right? I had to like, okay, so I had this probably 8 month spiritual sabbatical existential crisis of like, what is my purpose in life? I was meditating 3 hours a day, going to yoga every day. Like,
We love those, okay? That's where I'm at in my spiritual journey.
I'm like,
Two
what am
hours a
I?
day of prayer, yoga, and all of it.
Yeah, so I'm like, what am I supposed to do? What is my life purpose now? I thought this was my life purpose, but I'm 33 and this can't be my life purpose, right? And then, so, I mean, this is at what, 34th, that last year, it was my spiritual sabbatical. And then I realized I did Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny, and it changed my life. It made me realize the reason that I have achieved all that I have at the age I have. Yes, it was hard work and determination and accountability, but the other reason was because I meant to light the way for others. And so he takes you through a process to do this. But the process, basically, at the end of the process, it's what is your life mission? We always define our business mission if you're an entrepreneur, but few of us define a life mission. And so when I went through this process, I was like, my life mission is to be a connector, to enjoy abundance and growth, and to light the way for others. And so lighting the way for others is why I was able to achieve what I have at the age that I have, which is like very young, because most people like they don't achieve that their whole life. And I'm like very fortunate. And so I think I've talked about this to a lot of my EO friends actually, where it's like you create your own luck. So yes, part of it is luck. They say like, oh, you're so lucky, but it's like you create the luck. Like it's like what you did, right? If you didn't go to that Galentine's event, you wouldn't have met me, right? If I didn't join EO, I wouldn't have met my mentor, who's a 3-time 8-figure founder. And so you create that luck by showing up to the events and doing the thing. So,
I think
mhm.
we get stuck, right?
Yeah,
It's very easy, Cathey, where I am in my journey right now.
yeah,
I had two options 4 weeks ago when my life completely blew up, and my job was there and then it wasn't. And lucky for me, I'm always
hmm,
searching for what my purpose is. But I think when the doors closed at news and I walked out, I looked up and I said, God, this is now your turn to start making a masterpiece in my life, because I knew that once I left news, that door was closed. And
yeah,
the news me, the Paulina that was a reporter, that was a journalist, that
mhm,
version of me is dead. Whatever
mhm,
this version is, whatever this version births forward is what I want to move forward in. And the thing that kept popping up for me was purpose and purpose and purpose. And
yeah,
like you, I had spent so much time in prayer, meditation, and just walking with the dog. So the dog's been loving me being at home and
oh, I
entrepreneurship,
love,
loving it.
I
Um,
love it.
and I love it too, Cathey. And then it was interesting because moving from news, which for my experience and many of the people that I know in news has become such a solitary experience, because you're doing everything by yourself, shooting, editing, writing, and you're out in the field and you're by yourself and you're going from location to location. So now I'm reworking and rewiring my brain from solitary and single to teamwork and working together and having these moments that you're creating, that you're talking about. I didn't even think of that, like these aren't even things that would come up in my brain, because in my head, I'm like, oh, there's a problem. Cool. I'll just solve it. I know how to solve problems. Like, you throw something my way, I'll sit there on Google, YouTube, and, until it's done and it's figured and it's done. It doesn't work that way always. And sometimes it really is creating those opportunities and going to a Galentine's event, meeting somebody, and like you said, a connector. And you are a connector, Cathey. In the short time I've known you, you have not only connected me, but I see and hear from others that I've met through you how you've connected them and how you've helped change and form their lives.
I mean, I love it. And I think it's like, that problem solver thing is good. Like, I'm the same way. I'm always like just solution oriented. But
Hmm.
on my journey, I will say like that's a lesson I learned the hard way. As a child of immigrants, is like if you want something done right, do it yourself. Don't trust
Hmm.
anybody. And that's how you're raised when people come from a different country, sometimes where it's not as collaborative and not as kind as our country is, which is I'm a huge like I'm a patriot. I'm like I love America, right? And
I
it's
love
true
it.
because America, like there's so much opportunity and so many great people. And I think a lot of people that are born here take that for granted. And being born and living in this country even is just a privilege in and of itself. It's nothing to do with gender or race or anything of that, right? I'm a woman, I'm an immigrant, I'm a woman of color, whatever, right? I'm Asian, right? And I realize that like it is such a blessing to live here because my mother, like my family where they came from, it's not the same. Like it's not the same in Asia. They don't have all we have, and I think I shared with you, but it's like I heard an amazing speaker last month actually in January for the EO chapter retreat. His name is Jeremy Pointsnod. He's a blind golfer, which I didn't know
Wow.
blind golf was a thing. He lost
Existed, right?
yeah, he lost his eyesight at 19 years old, and his story is just so inspirational, I guess, or like it just and it's also so like eye-opening, like no pun intended, but it's just like wow, what do we have to complain about? Basically, what he talks about is together we are limitless, alone we are limited. And he's like going blind at such a young age forced him to recognize the blessings he has, which is the people in his life and how to rely on and other people and ask for help. Because I think so many of us are scared or embarrassed to ask for help because we were taught that way. It's our education system. But if you actually look at the root of it, our education system started in the Industrial Revolution where they wanted to create these drone like workers with no freaking personality, with no goals, and they wanted you to
Yeah.
be just compliant. And so our education system is a complete failure, which is a whole other story in and of itself, which is why I'm going to start a school in 3 years, which we've talked about. But our education system is god awful and it's so antiquated, it's so outdated. So most of us that have been raised in this education system don't realize what you actually need to succeed in today's society in 2024. And a big part of that, if you ever meet or listen to 7, 8, 9, 10-figure entrepreneurs, even like I went to a conference called Limitless Expo last year. My business partners spoke on one of the panels. It was run by Ken McElroy, who is Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki's business partner. He is actually my business partner's personal mentor, Ken McElroy. And so what they talked about, like it wasn't just him speaking, it was a bunch of different speakers, and they were all 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs. Like Chris Voss, never split the difference. He was one of the speakers. Like they're big name, legitimate speakers. One of the most common underlying sentiments I remember that was a big takeaway was you have to work with each other. Like you have to find good partners, you have to find teams, you have to find people to collaborate with. And school teaches you, oh, if you work together, it's cheating. You can't cheat on your test. You can't cheat, right? And so people are like conditioned to think it's cheating to collaborate. It's cheating to work on a team or with a partner. But everything I've witnessed firsthand in the business world is successful understand the importance, whether it's a business partner, whether it's your team, whether it is like just collaborating with other colleagues or vendors or whatever it is, right, across industries. Like that's how you succeed, is that understanding and embracing together we are limitless.
The first time I heard you say that, I think in my head that immigrant mentality comes in. I'm like, news, immigrant, all of it. Again, it's kind of you learn to just rely on yourself when you've been let down
Yeah.
so many times.
Yeah.
But whether it was at the Galentine's event or every event that I've attended with you and sit downs, classes, whatever, and even events that I've attended since that are about female empowerment and business owners and entrepreneurship, every single speaker that gets up there has said the same thing: collaboration at the end of the day. And I think even in mental health, right? We're all part of this human experience and we're part of the shared experience. And until we're actually sharing these stories, we don't know what the other one is going through. And so the same way as in business, as it is in life, until we start having these conversations, we're in a bubble. We're in a bubble and we don't really know what the possibilities are of our future, or the scope of our future, right? That limitless possibility of what we can achieve if we only lean into something that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk to me about what it's like to lean into the uncomfortable, Cathey, because when I talk to you, I don't get uncomfortable, right? Like you are so confident and comfortable in your own skin, but I know that doesn't come easy. You're a female, you're Asian, you're an immigrant, there's so many different, factors. If we go into the line of things, I'm sure that you'd be like, well, I got in my head about this or this. Talk to me about kind of what have been some of these limiting beliefs that you had to get past in order to get to where you are in your success today.
There are so many. Yeah, there's so many limiting beliefs I had to overcome, like I shared before. It's like, if you want something done right, do it yourself. No, there's so many people who do it way better than me. Like, I've learned to rely on my team and to hire people smarter than me at certain things I'm not good at, right? But just so I think I shared this before. I don't know if I did with you, but I've shared it a lot recently. I spoke to a school that my friend owns. It's a cosmetology school. But I started the talk by asking, how many of you have experienced anxiety or imposter
Mm.
syndrome or let fear hold you back from doing something you wanted to go after? How many of us have experienced depression, right? Like, raise your hand. Like, I'll be the first to admit this. And not enough people in positions of power that are leaders are saying this openly and are being that vulnerable because they're afraid to appear weak. But vulnerability is a power and it's a superpower. It's an ability to empathize and to be relatable, to build rapport. And when you're that authentic, that's when you really relate. People relate with you, and it resonates with people, right? And they trust you. And so, what I think the key is like, what helped me overcome my fear, imposter syndrome, anxiety, depression, all the things, is realizing when you experience all of those negative things, it's because you're suffering from self. It's what's going on in between your head, right? You're suffering from self. And you suffer from self when you're focusing on self and you're being selfish.
Mm.
And it's because you're like, what if I look stupid? What if they judge me? What if I have haters? What if I get criticized? What if I embarrass myself? What if whatever? Like, it's all me, me, me. But when you shift the focus from inwards to outwards and you're like, what problem am I solving? Who can I serve? What is this gonna like do? How does this add value to this person, to my community, to the world, to humanity even? And like when you focus and you shift outwards to serving and solving problems, all that noise and that like little voice disappears because it's not about you anymore. It's about who you're speaking to. It's about the world. It's about something bigger than yourself again. And so it's like, who cares if I have a pimple is what I say, right? I get breakouts. I think I have one right now. Like, who cares if I have a pimple, or who cares if like I have a weird angle and I look like my hubby edits my YouTube videos, like I told you, and he'll just like to troll me for fun because that's our relationship, right? And it's all be like this, and I'm like, literally, you got like all the freaking chins, right? And it used like years ago, earlier on my journey, that would bother me. I'd be the
Sure.
kind of girl who like would spend 15 minutes editing one photo because like, oh my god, I have bags under my eyes. Oh my god, I have a pimple. Oh my god, I look like I have a double chin, right? And now I don't even give a shit. Like, it's like, I'm sorry, cursing, but I'm from New York, right? But it's like I don't give a shit anymore because I'm like, who cares? I'm me. I'm authentically me. The people who are gonna love me and are belong in my circle are gonna accept and appreciate me as I am, and they're gonna understand the value I bring, regardless if I look like I have two chins or like I have a pimple, right? It doesn't matter. And so that's how I overcame that when I stopped focusing on myself, when I started
Yeah.
focusing on others, on serving, on solving problems. And then the insecurities, the imposter syndrome, the whatever it was, that all just dissipated.
For me, what comes up when I think of purpose and I think of values aligned, I think of all the ways in which my values did not align with news and how often I would just, I'd like you, I'd sit there and, you go through that like photo and you're trying to make it perfect. And in news, I remember in Kentucky when I lived there, one of the things that the coaches and people would come in and they'd say for females, especially, they said, we need to be ready for a 360 view, right? Which means like your boobs, your fat, everything like has to be sucked in perfectly. Like you got to have a perfect 360 view of you all around, no matter which camera angle hits you, right? And that's not life. That's not
No,
life. Life is
not
not
realistic.
perfect. Life is not pretty. Life is messy and genuine. And again, when we are so focused on making it pretty and we're not focused on the people or the purpose behind it, we lose the entire meaning of what we're trying to achieve. And so I love when I hear you speak because you walk that walk, Cathey. You walk the walk of saying, I want to hear entrepreneurs say that they had struggles, that they've had those depressive states, that they've had those valleys, and then they had to climb up that mountain. And you talk about that. And it's inspiring to see because not only do you see the transformation, like I know people who have known you 2 years ago when you were in a very different state than where you are today.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see what you've been able to accomplish when you really take ego and self out and start serving others.
Yeah. And I was there. I'm like, I share from a place of experience, and I will always be the first to admit my fuck ups, I say. Like, I'll be the first to admit all of my failures and all of my fuck ups because I've learned a lot of my lessons the hard way, which is why I've learned the importance of sharing my story because most people don't talk about their failures and fuck ups, and the journey isn't easy. And when you just talk about the highlight reel and the wins, people don't realize that, like, it's normal to do that. It's normal to make mistakes. It's normal to, I call it failing forward and freedom to fail. And so when you have that freedom to fail and you focus on failing forward, it's actually a great blessing. If you focus on the lesson in every situation, it is always a blessing. I always say you either fail or you learn. I mean, you either win or you learn, right? So it's like when you fail, you're learning, right? So it's not like you're failing backward, you're failing forward, but you have to learn from your mistakes. And I think that's the thing. It's part of I call it extreme personal accountability. It's one of my core values for myself and for my business. But the reason people don't fail forward is because they try to play victim and they try to be like, oh, woe is me. Like, oh my God, this and that. And they blame everything and everyone other than themselves. And one of my favorite sayings, my business partner, she's half Korean. Her mother is an immigrant from Korea. And so her mother's always like, it's a blame yourself situation, Lisa. Like my business partner, Lisa. She's like, it's a blame yourself situation. And it's such a simple concept, right? From this like old Asian lady, but it's so true. Like sometimes it's just a blame yourself situation. You have to recognize that. Like, what did I do? What series of choices and actions or inaction has led me to where I am today? And am I willing to take ownership of that and change that? Because the majority of people, if they're honest with themselves, are not doing that. They're just like, oh, it's this person, it's that person, it's my parents, it's my circumstances, it's my childhood, it's my race, it's my ethnicity, it's whatever it is. They blame. They don't go like, okay, these are the setbacks, these are the circumstances. How can I play these cards the way I want to play them, right? How can I focus on the solutions? How can I focus on being resourceful instead of complaining about my lack of resources? Because there's always an abundance of resources if you know where to look.
I read somewhere recently that said if you are blaming others, you have a long way to go. If you're blaming yourself, you're halfway there. If you blame no one, you have arrived.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of that arrival comes from owning your shit,
Yeah.
owning those fuck ups. And what I'm again processing and I guess reprocessing in my brain right now is understanding that while I am the sum of all the things and experiences that I have been through, that is not my personality, even though I've let it be my personality. I've let it be like this person that does this, kind of what you said, like people are purpose driven because of the trauma that they've had.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to use my trauma in the way for a purpose, right? I've just kind of been using it for that like, fuck you moment. I'm going to get there because I need to get there because my ego wants me to get there. My pride wants me to get there. And I feel in my head that if I get to this level of success, that's what I need to, I guess, fill whatever void that I'm trying to run away from. And when I started looking at what voids I need to fill, I'm like, oh, there's some self that needs to, kind of happen, some healing and purpose. And really, again, purpose is what came up. And who is Paulina Bucka? What does purpose look like? And how does purpose help others? Not just in news where it's all glamorous and pretty. And where is the ugly? How can we bring the ugly forward and make it pretty and make it yours?
And it's okay. I think the ego is, most of us are driven by ego in the beginning because it's what we know. It's the norm. It's society. And again, going back to Tony Robbins, he talks a lot about this, right? There's a chart that he has in Date with Destiny that he goes over. It's called levels of consciousness. And so basically we start out with this baby love. It's like people will love you unconditionally just because you're a baby. And then you go on and there's this family love and then there's this community. And then you go on to love the community, love the world, love humanity, right? And it's like all about me. How can people love me? Or it's like horse trading, right? Oh, okay, I'll love you if you do this for me. That's most people's relationships. And that's why most people don't have healthy relationships. Like if you ever think about every time you've dated someone, I'll love you if you buy me flowers, if you take me out on dates, if you do this, if you do that. So he calls it horse trading, right? It's not like I'll love you, because of who you are as a person. And it's interesting because when you start treating people that way, it's like there's a law of, I think it's resonance is the name word, but it's kind of like gravity, right? They say law of attraction, but the better term is like you don't get what you want, you get what you are. So when you start treating people the way you want to be treated and you start loving unconditionally, that's when you get the unconditional love. when you treat people with kindness, that's when you get people who are kind to you. And so the people who complain about, oh, it's so hard to date or it's so hard to find good friends, I'm like, but then look at who you are or who you're being, right? Who you're being. It's not what you want, it's who you are. You attract what you are and who you are. I always tell people, like, look in the mirror, like, and it's something that people don't
Right.
want to hear, especially when they're single, like chronically single, I call it, like forever. And it's sometimes it's good to be single. Like, I think it's good to have that time of self-reflection and to take some time to look at yourself.
To heal,
But
sure.
you need to heal, of course. But if you've been single or there's a series of failed relationships for years, then it's time to kind of reflect on yourself and be like, what's the common denominator here? Who's the
Mhm.
common denominator here? Right?
Yeah.
And it's like being completely honest, uncomfortably honest with yourself about that is a key to growth in both personal and professional relationships. And for me, like, I'm the first to admit my fuck ups and failures. One of my fuck ups and failures in business was like turnover on the commercial team. I have a both commercial and a residential real estate brokerage and team. And on the commercial team, I was like, okay, I have this turnover. What's the common denominator is me. Why after I've invested so much time, energy, and effort into these people, and I felt like I treated them really well, and I did. I mean, I provided them leads, I like provided them mentorship. Why are they still leaving? And what I realized is I lacked empathy. I was like, work,
Mm.
work, work, work harder, no one cares, because that's how I was brought up. But
Yeah.
people in this day and age, they don't want a leader like that. I was like, work harder, no one cares, right? That's number one. I lacked the empathy of like, oh, you want balance in your life, and I didn't have,
That's not a thing in
yeah, like I
immigrant
was like,
households.
yeah, like exactly. Like I was like, oh, you wanna like have balance? I don't know what that is, right? I was like, just work harder, who
No.
cares? And so like that was when I lacked empathy, where I was like, I don't understand why you can't work on the Saturday when we have like work to do, right? And it's like weird like that, where
Yeah.
like, oh, you want to spend time with your like husband or your whatever, instead of like, I don't get it, right? Like that's just me. Like that was my lack of empathy. That was one of the things I recognized about myself earlier when I was like in that mode. And another thing I recognized is like, instead of giving people the opportunity to fail forward and to learn from their mistakes, I would just fix it for them. And that was not a good
Ooh,
thing.
that's a
So
big
instead of being
one.
like, hey, here's some constructive criticism, here's like, you did this well, but you didn't do this well, you fucked up on this and it's okay, it's a mistake, it's a lesson. Here's how you can fix it and do it better the next time. No, I'd be like, that's not how it's supposed to be done. Let me fix it for you. Like, and that's my fuck up, right? And so being self-aware of that, I realized I was like, okay, I fucked up. Like I fucked up real bad. Like, but a part of that was my ego. Like, oh, I can do it better than you.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, that's my ego talking, like, I can do it better than you. Or I work harder than you. Like, and it's stupid shit like that.
But Cathey, a good boss knows that somewhere in between they have to change their actions in order to make sure that people and their staff stay on, right? And so that again, that goes back to that's a testament to you and your person that you took the time to say there is something about me that is repelling these people out of my life, out of my business. How can I fix that? And what do I do to be the best boss I
Yeah,
can be, to be the best Cathey I can be,
yeah,
the best person I can be, truly, because at the end of the day, you're showing up as Cathey, right? So whether it's business Cathey or Cathey as personal
yeah.
Cathey, you still want to show up as the best version of you. But one of the other things that I wanted to touch on was you talk about reflecting, and sometimes it is on you, right? Like sometimes whether it's your relationship or it's your business or it's a family matter or whatever, if it's repeating that cycle happens over and over, then you do have to look inward and say, maybe it's me. Maybe what do I do next? I find that with our younger generations, we are now in a world of we label things. We are quick to say someone's got ADHD or it's me, I did this or I did that, but we don't necessarily take the steps, like the next steps to remedy that. So, what in your world have you done when you notice that to remedy some of your mistakes?
So I've invested tens of thousands of dollars in personal development. Like, so I bought the Tony Robbins mastery course, mastery bundle. And so I went to UPW, Unleash the Power Within. And then at that event, that was live in Palm Beach back in November of 21, I believe it was. And then I bought the mastery bundle, which came with business mastery, life mastery, wealth mastery, date with destiny. And through these programs is really the biggest like aha moments. Like the break he Tony Robbins calls them breakthroughs, right? You had a breakthrough. And for me, it's like what I realize is the breakthrough comes after the breakdown. And a lot of times that breakdown
Ooh.
is necessary for you to have a breakthrough, right? It's just like a butterfly, phoenix rising, like these analogies, or a diamond is built under pressure. There's so many of these analogies in the universe and in life, but it's the same with humans. It's the same with humans that sometimes when you're in your like deepest, darkest rock bottom moment, it's right before the breakthrough. And I've witnessed it myself, and I've witnessed it in some of my closest and dearest friends who are also some of the most successful people I know, where your breakthrough comes after a major breakdown. And you just have to know, like, there's we joke about it, but it's like, and in our entrepreneur circles, where it's like, if you have not been on your knees with your head in your hands, like crying, begging to God or the universe or whatever divine that you believe in, to help you out, you have not really
Right.
experienced entrepreneurship and you're not there yet. Like if you think it's all rainbows and butterflies, if you all think it's just like these small little challenges, you haven't experienced your breakdown or breakthrough yet. And so investing in that is really important. Like a lot of people are like, oh, like these like cult things or these woo woo programs. And I'm like, I don't care if you call it whatever the fuck you want. Like, I don't care. Like, I love Tony Robbins. And the reason is because, like, and it's so funny because so many people I've met through the Tony Robbins programs are 7, 8, 9 figure entrepreneurs, have doubled,
Wow.
tripled, quadrupled, 10x their net worth or their business revenue. So you can call it whatever you want, judge all you want, but the people who invest in personal development and personal growth, it's the best ROI ever. So I tell people that. People are like, "Oh, what should I invest in?" I'm like, "How much money do you make? How much money do you have?" And I'm like, if you have less than like a few $100,000, you should be investing in personal development first. That's going to be the best ROI. It's a few thousands, maybe even 10,000, right? And I know people who honestly they put it on credit cards. Like they didn't have the cash. They put it on credit cards, which I wouldn't recommend honestly, but a lot of those
As a
people I know,
businesswoman, you wouldn't.
yeah, but it's like I've heard stories of the people that did this and then they got an amazing ROI off it, right? They like ended up paying that debt back and then some and 10xing that shit. And so the best ROI you're ever going to get, the best thing you're ever going to invest in is going to be yourself and what goes on between your head. Because the mindset is the foundation of everything. And if people don't understand that, like they're never going to be successful. Like I see so many people trying to build a business, trying to build a relationship, trying to build an amazing life and never working on the foundation. So it's like if you were to build a house on stilts, how long is that house going to stay on stilts? What, a
Right.
bad storm comes through, it falls, right? And so that's what you're trying to do if you don't work on the foundation first. And mindset is the foundation. And so that is the first and foremost is just investing in the mindset training and the personal growth and really committing to it, right? Because it's not just so it's the money, of course, it costs money for a lot of these programs. Like a lot of my friends at Landmark is another program that a lot of my friends have done that they swear by. And one of my friends, she wrote the book From Bounce Checks to Private Jets. Her name's Hazel Ortega. And she said going through the Landmark program changed her life, just like Tony Robbins changed my life. But like with that program, it's also like, I don't know, 3 or 5 grand. Like they're not cheap. But the
Mhm.
other part of it is also they're not easy. They're usually like Tony Robbins programs are between 4 to 6 full days, like 12 to 14-hour days. You got to commit the time, not just money. And so some people either they don't want to commit the money, they don't want to invest the money, and they don't want to spend the money, number one. Or number two, they won't show up fully and commit to themselves. So they'll pay for it, they'll pop in and out, or they'll go like one day instead of 5 days, right? And they don't get the full benefits. Whereas like I was like, you know what? I'm committing all in, like canceled, like blocked out my calendar, no appointments, nothing. And so 6 full days for Date with Destiny. But 6 days of Date with Destiny was more, I think, effective and valuable than probably like 6 years of coaching, therapy, and all the things. Like, I think that's gonna have like
Wow.
100x return, not even just 10x. Like, I think the amount of money I spent on that particular program, Date with Destiny, is gonna have 100x return. And it's because I did the work though. I committed and I did the work. Cause I shared it with some of my friends actually. Like I paid for it and I invited some of my friends because it's a virtual live stream. And a lot of people just popped in and out. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, they're on their own journey. They're not there yet. But they're also my same friends that are making, are at this block and never exceeding 7 figures. They're still at their stagnant, like, and I was there and I realized everyone goes at their pace because I was stuck at about 150K a year for many years until I did Day with Destiny. And, no, sorry, not Day with Destiny. UPW was the first program I did. Unleash the Power Within, which is Tony Robbins' first program that I did. And after doing that, so I went from making 150,000-ish a year for many, many years, which to most people that's good. To me, it was like, okay, it was good. And so that's why I made excuses. I never broke through that until I did that program, and made 300,000 my next year. So I doubled.
Wow.
And then I made 600,000 the year after that. But that was not just Tony Robbins. After that, it was also EO and finding my mentor and learning the framework and systems that helped me scale. So I basically doubled and doubled again. So I went from 150K for many years, just stuck, stagnant, because I didn't work on what's between my head. So I just tried to power through, and it got me to 150K a year. I built business. That's like me personal revenue, like not including my business I'm talking about. And then I built businesses that were multiple six figures, but like that's gross revenue. Again, expenses are high in business. And so I was stuck at that for many years until I realized like, hey, the reason that I'm not breaking through this barrier is because I'm stuck in my own head, is because of my limiting beliefs, is because of my inability to trust, is because I haven't done the inner work and the self-work to break through and heal my traumas, my hurts, my limiting, all these things that are just like keeping me from really reaching the next level of success. And I think I share this analogy, but it's like you have a boulder that you need to move out of your life. If you want to move this boulder, you can push it uphill and it'll work. It's like a struggle. Like, it's like, have you ever been to the gym and do those sled pushes or sled pulls, right? And then
Yeah.
like, it's like you're piling all the 45-pound plates on it, trying to push that, right? Kind of like the analogy. Imagine that. Or you can push your boulder down a hill and let gravity do the work. And that's when you're in what I call flow state. And you've probably heard a lot about flow state from a lot of really successful people. But flow state comes when you focus on serving, when you break through your mental barriers, when you've done the inner work, where you've worked on your mindset and you realize like, what is the true purpose of this?
What are your 3 tips to anybody who is either on this path of maybe not even entrepreneurship, but just on a path of finding themselves and they're in this stuck moment and they don't really know how to move forward? What are your 3 tips of advice on life, on finances?
I think it's finding your why is the core of it, like defining your purpose, right? And how do you do that is you think about like, what's going to drive you? What's the bigger purpose? Like, like I said, for me, it was my mother first. And then secondly, it's now to light the way for others and to be that beacon of light that I wish I had on my journey. I had amazing mentors along the way. I'm very fortunate in that regard. But there weren't many people who looked like me when I started. There weren't many women or minorities at the top. I was in commercial real estate and real estate investing, and we started in New York City. It's male, pale, and stale. And I had
Yeah.
great mentors along the way, but I also went out and got it like right. So I always say action breeds confidence. So that's another major lesson, right? So number 1, define your purpose. Number 2, action breeds confidence. So stop getting stuck in analysis paralysis and just take action. And the clarity comes after you start taking action. The clarity will come, but you have to do the work. And most people are just like overthinking, overanalyzing, coming up with reasons and excuses not to do the work, not to take the first step, or why they can't do it. But if you just take the first step, you'll see the path will become clear, right? And so that purpose, the action, and then really I think the last one is probably let's see. I know there's so many good things, but if I had to sum it up, I would say to lead like a woman, which to me means to lead with love, kindness, and
Ooh.
empathy. Because I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
in this day and age, it's no longer the age of like you can exploit people or step on others to get ahead. Like that is so antiquated and that is male, pale, and stale. This is not the 1950s anymore. And that's not how humanity is. We're not in survival mode as a society anymore. And the way you operate in survival mode versus the way you operate in an abundant society is very different. So having that abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset allows you to lead with love, empathy, and kindness. And that way, like you're pushing your boulder down the hill instead of up because you're attracting the blessings and the clients and the abundance into your life. You're not chasing it. It's like the analogy I use is like you can chase butterflies, right? And they're just going to keep running away. But if you build a garden with beautiful flowers, the butterflies will come to you.
Thanks for watching, and that's okay. Join us next week on Wednesday for another episode. In the meantime, subscribe below, like, comment, and share, or find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next week.